Good evening there, ladies and gentlemen. What is happening? Hopefully, y'all are having a wonderful day today. So, I thought that I would give my little fight prediction on the main event. Now, I already gave my UFC 259 predictions, but I thought that I would kind of break this fight down because to me, this is debatably the most confusing matchup to really break down. Either that one or the Petr Yan versus Aljamain Sterling one. That one's really tough as well. Israel Adesanya is going to go into this fight as, I don't know about a heavy favorite, but from what I've seen, a good 80% of people are going with Israel Adesanya. And I'm just here to say that if Jan Blachowicz were to come out of this fight the victor, I would not be surprised. Anyways, we're going to hear former MMA fighter Chael Sonnen, former UFC fighter Chael Sonnen, talk about his pick. Now, if you are a part of the MMA community and you listen to a lot of Chael Sonnen's predictions, you know that he gets about 90% of them wrong. So, of course, people are already making jokes that you should put the house on Jan because he has predicted Israel. But I want to go into it. I want to see why he picked him. And I want to see his points, and I'm going to give you my points as well. So basically this video is about, does Jan Blachowicz have a chance to win this fight? And I believe he has a major chance to win this fight. Do I believe the victor will be Israel Adesanya? Most likely. But would I be surprised if Jan Blachowicz won this fight? Not at all. So we'll see what happens.
My final prediction for Adesanya versus Blachowicz, I'm going Adesanya. Guys, I just think that speed matters. I'm very confident in who the better fighter is in terms of who can do more and who is more dynamic.
Well, let me pause it right there because Chael has already said a lot within the first several seconds. First of all, speed is a big part of the reason why I picked Israel. I believe Israel Adesanya is going to go after the legs. I do not believe that Israel Adesanya is going to knock Jan Blachowicz out. I believe that if Israel Adesanya does win, it most likely is going to be off a decision, off a unanimous or a split decision. That's what I believe it'll be. Most likely unanimous one if he does win. That's my prediction. I'm not saying that he can't knock Jan out. I just don't think he will. But when it comes down to the overall, a certain amount of the people, that are going into this fight, I have a couple friends that I'm going to go watch it with this Saturday at Buffalo Wild Wings or something like that, some sports bar, probably Buffalo Wild Wings. But when it comes down to it, one of my friends who watches MMA a lot of the times with me, he doesn't watch it as often as I do, but he says, well, Israel Adesanya will probably just knock this dude out. When it comes down to it, he'll probably just knock this dude out and just beat him. I'm not overly impressed with this guy. Jan Blachowicz is no pushover. And I think a lot of people are very much underestimating this guy's skill set. I'm not saying that in certain areas Israel Adesanya has certain skill sets that Jan Blachowicz may not have. And to a certain amount of people, this might even be going a little bit too far. There might actually be certain skill sets that Jan Blachowicz has that Israel Adesanya does not have. For one, Israel Adesanya, and if you watch this in a lot of his fights in the Kelvin Gastelum fight and the Robert Whittaker fight, Israel Adesanya does not avoid a jab very well. And one thing I've noticed about Jan Blachowicz, he has a very potent and very great jab. He is, once again, and I said this in my prediction video, Jan Blachowicz, besides maybe Anthony Johnson, is probably the most powerful puncher at 205 pounds that I've seen, at least within the past 5 years. He may, he may even be more powerful than Anthony Johnson. Because Jan Blachowicz, when I see him punch, sometimes he's putting 50% power into these shots, and he still basically knocks them on their ass. Like when you seen that one punch that he hit Dominic Reyes with, that was like, that looked like a 75% punch, or a punch to where, it was a shift punch. So I'm not saying it probably did not hurt, but you just don't see that knock opponents down very often in the way that it did. And he just, he basically got knocked on his ass. So it is what it is. Jan Blachowicz is the hardest puncher at 205 pounds that I've seen within a certain amount of years. And one thing I noticed about Israel Adesanya is that he can get hit in exchanges. Now, I noticed in the Robert Whittaker fight, he was able to evolve. And the problem with Robert Whittaker in that fight, and the problem a little bit with Robert Whittaker, is that he does not keep his hands up sometimes when he throws in the exchanges. I believe Jan Blachowicz actually is a little bit of a stronger fighter in the exchanges than Robert Whittaker is. And a lot of people are going to disagree because Jan Blachowicz, he actually keeps his hands up in the exchanges. That's just what I see now. Come the fight, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe overall Jan Blachowicz, maybe he gets caught. I don't know. I'm sure he'll get caught with a couple of exchanges, but Jan Blachowicz is not afraid to exchange. He's extremely accurate in the exchanges on the inside. He backs up when he needs to. Now, in my opinion, what Jan Blachowicz is going to have to do in order to win this fight, I think that he's going to have to go to the legs. I think he's going to have to go to the body. And you notice overall that, in a lot of my predictions or a lot of my breakdowns, I always say that because leg kicks to me, it's kind of like in boxing. In boxing, you need a very consistent jab. It's kind of the same in UFC. The jab in UFC, of course you have a jab, with your punch, but a good jab in UFC also are going to be the leg kicks because especially if you have a lengthy opponent like in Israel Adesanya, go to the body, go to the legs. You're going to tire him out. You're going to make him a little bit more frightened. When Israel Adesanya gets hit to the legs, he will get hit with the jab a little bit more. He will become a little bit more frightened. I've seen it with Robert Whittaker. I've seen it with Kelvin Gastelum. So it is not impossible to defeat Israel Adesanya. I think that a certain amount of people are actually overrating Israel Adesanya's skill set and underrating Jan Blachowicz' skill set. Now, that's not me saying that Israel Adesanya is not a phenomenal fighter because he is. He is an A+++ fighter, no doubt about it. But he is not, I don't see him necessarily, say, on the same level as, say, a John Jones, where I believe that his skill set is a little bit more superior than Israel Adesanya. John Jones is not as vulnerable to the jab as an Israel Adesanya is. I believe that John Jones usually has a little bit more answers in certain situations than Israel Adesanya does. Now, once again, that's not me discrediting Israel Adesanya. But there are certain times where I see him to where if his opponents, if they would have just kept their hands up a little bit more, or if they would have just had a little bit more gas, they possibly could have pulled that fight out. All right? Israel Adesanya against Robert Whittaker. Robert Whittaker was winning that whole entire first round until he got knocked down in that last part of the round. Now, of course, shoulda, coulda, woulda. If Kenny's, ifs and whatever the old saying is, I don't remember it, but you know what I'm talking about. Basically, if everything could go our way, we would all have a happy day, but things just don't happen like that. And Israel Adesanya got the victory at the end of the day. But the bottom line is this, Israel Adesanya does have faults. When he gets in exchanges, sometimes he is very hittable. He is very hittable with the jab, and this is not going to be a Paulo Costa or a Robert Whittaker that he is in the ring with. This is going to be a Jan Blachowicz who only has a 2-inch reach disadvantage, who can knock you out with either hand with one shot, even a pivot punch. And on top of that, when it comes down to it, you're talking about a person that has an excellent jab, is not a one-dimensional fighter like a Paulo Costa. Now, once again, this is going to sound like I'm shitting all over Israel Adesanya's wins. I'm not. Because his win over Robert Whittaker, that was a great win. And even his win over Paulo Costa was a great win. But Paulo Costa is not necessarily a multi-dimensional fighter. Robert Whittaker is a multi-dimensional fighter. Yoel Romero is a multi-dimensional fighter. Kelvin Gastelum is even a multi-dimensional fighter. Paulo Costa, although a very decent fighter, he's not a multi-dimensional fighter. Very, very one-dimensional fighter, has one game plan, and that's basically to go for it and try to smash you. He doesn't really have much else in his game plan. So it is what it is. That's why he was so unsuccessful against Israel Adesanya. Jan Blachowicz, when it comes down to it, I do believe that his main game plan is probably going to be to pressure Israel Adesanya and make him uncomfortable. But the way that he's going to have to win this fight, he's going to have to do kicks to the body. He's going to have to do leg kicks. He's going to have to make Israel Adesanya not just feel the power with his hands. He's going to have to make sure that he feels it in the lower half of his body. That's what he's going to have to do, because if he tries to headhunt with Israel the whole entire time, Israel Adesanya is very slippery. He is very maneuverable. Even though he can be hittable a little bit here and there, he can be caught in the middle, especially with straight punches like a jab or a straight cross. Which Jan Blachowicz has very great straight punches. When it comes down to it, Jan Blachowicz, he can't win off of points here. in my opinion. He's probably going to have to knock him out, or if he is going to have to win off of points, he's going to have to go to Israel Adesanya's body. And I promise you, if Jan Blachowicz wins this fight, it's most likely not going to be by decision. If he gets to Israel Adesanya's body early, if he gets him with a jab early, he is most likely going to knock him out unless he makes Israel curl up into his shell and basically Israel Adesanya is afraid to throw. I would not be surprised if that happened because Jan Blachowicz's power, his accuracy, and his speed actually is a little bit underrated as well. So we'll see what happens. Once again, this this is going to sound like I'm shitting all over Israel Adesanya. I'm not. I'm just telling you guys what I personally see from Jan Blachowicz and what he's going to have to do to win. He has to go to his body. He has to have the right strategy because Jan Blachowicz, in my opinion, has the ability to beat Israel Adesanya. Now, what is Israel Adesanya's, strategy here? What does he have to do? I think that Israel Adesanya also has to go after the legs. I think he has to work off his jab. I think he has to work in multiple angles. I think he has to work in different dimensions. I think that he always has to, keep moving side to side and make sure that he's not caught in one place. Because if he's caught in one place, like sometimes he has been in the past, if Jan Blachowicz lands the right punch, he will knock Israel Adesanya out. I have no doubt about that in my mind. Jan Blachowicz has one-shot knockout power, and it seems like he has a decent gas tank. So we'll see what happens.
I don't, as a principle, believe that makes you more effective or going to make you the victor. Quick story, guys. Shared this with you before, but let me remind you. When I first came up, I came through Team Quest. Team Quest was owned by Dan Henderson and Randy Couture. And before it was called Team Quest, it was called Performance Quest. And it was an actual physical location. It was a beautiful family gym. Like a small, think of a 24-hour fitness, except Ma and Pa owned. And Ma and Pa were named Dan and Randy. So they turned the ballet, the aerobics room, they matted that out, hung up a couple of heavy bags, and that's what was Performance Quest, went on to be Team Quest. And there was only like 5 or 6 of us, so that was plenty of room. But those 5 or 6 guys were either fighting in Pride, fighting in the UFC, fighting in Abu Dhabi, or representing the country at the Olympic trials. So it was 4 or 5 pretty rough guys, but there was no belt system. And I remember Randy Couture explaining this, and he was saying, we are on a quest for performance, meaning, do you win or do you not? I don't care who's got a black belt. I don't care who's mastered Taekwondo and Aikido. I want to know if you.
Speaking of John Jones, by the way, now that I think about it, I forgot that the winner of Stipe Miocic versus Francis Ngannou, which I predict will be Stipe, but my gut is telling me that for some reason Ngannou is going to get the upset, even though Stipe is the more multi-dimensional fighter and the greater fighter. I'm still going to predict Stipe, but we'll see what happens. Either way, when it comes down to it, if Stipe Miocic versus John Jones happens, that's a 50-50 fight. I think a lot of people, of course, are going to go with John Jones. Don't underestimate Stipe Miocic in that fight. I think a lot of people really underestimated Stipe against Daniel Cormier in that third fight. And I told people that Stipe was going to win that third fight because Stipe would be able to handle Daniel Cormier's wrestling. People forget Stipe is very powerful. He's very upper body strong. And on top of that, he is a Division I wrestler. Okay? It is what it is. On top of that, Stipe Miocic can also knock you out with one shot. So it is what it is. So that John Jones versus Stipe Miocic fight, that's a great fight. Now, Stipe Miocic against lengthier opponents, against more skilled opponents, he is going to be a little bit more hittable. So that's the thing overall where I see Stipe having a little bit of problems with John Jones. And we'll see how John Jones' power translates up to heavyweight. But when it comes down to it, that's a very interesting fight, man.
Go match up a mano. Who's going to win? That's all I want to know. As simple of an idea as that sounds to you right now, that was a very foreign phenomenon at the time. I mean, the Bruce Lee and the Chuck Norris, which was bow to you and my father says, and all this honor that we knew of martial arts, we only knew from Hollywood. There was no actual martial arts. So this was a big deal when you couldn't get 2 karate guys. You couldn't get a karate guy and a taekwondo guy to train together. It would be blasphemy. You couldn't get a judo guy to go get rounds with a boxing guy. Just when it happened, you picked your own. So Randy Couture really was ahead of things when he said the only question I want to know about and the only result I want to know is who can beat who. However you're going to get that done within the rule set you're fighting under, fine with me. But I still want to know who can beat who. Now, the reason I bring that to you is just because I am saying that with my eyes, Adesanya can do more and is flashier and trickier and can keep you guessing and can hurt you in more ways with more weapons. I'm right about that, but
You know, a certain amount of people say that Adesanya has more weapons. We'll see about that. Once again, I've seen Jan Blachowicz fight his past several fights, and after this fight, we might be saying, damn, Jan Blachowicz actually seems to have more weapons than Adesanya. Don't be surprised, because Jan Blachowicz, man, once again, he's not... Jan Blachowicz is not only going to be the biggest fighter that Israel Adesanya has ever fought, he is going to be the most skilled fighter that he has ever fought. All right, at least in my opinion. All right, so it is what it is.
I'm not the guy that then argues that that's who's going to win. I also grew up through the Mike Tyson era, where having a hook with one hand and an uppercut with the other, letting everybody in the world know 3 months ahead of time, these are the only weapons you're going to use, and going out there and putting down man after man, showed you that it's really about the performance, right? Not how much do you know. But when I do watch Adesanya, look, I think that Adesanya is going to bring a lot of problems to the light heavyweight division, particularly with speed. And this is an experiment, right? This is going to be an experiment where a guy in Adesanya's case who has about 12 pounds he can gain walks around, wakes up about 193. He can go all the way up to 200.
I don't know if he wakes up actually at around 193, unless you're talking about him when he's a little bit lower in weight. Israel Adesanya says that he walks around about 205. I can assure you, Jan Blachowicz is going to be about 225, 230 for fight night. So Israel better be careful, because Jan Blachowicz, once again, that dude can hit. So it is what it is, and he's very highly skilled. I see a certain amount of these people overall. When I commented on the Gilbert Burns versus Kamaru Usman fight, there was something that I said that a certain amount of people thought was an inflammatory statement, and I thought it was an ignorant statement on my part, because I said I thought that Gilbert Burns was going to have more of a chin. Now, maybe Kamaru Usman just hits that hard, but I thought Gilbert Burns didn't really show that great of a chin, and a certain amount of people said, well, you know, when you realize that he was knocked out by Dan Hooker, well, at 155, well, okay, but you can't always necessarily go by that. My point here is that you can't always necessarily judge a fighter by their past. You can to a certain degree, if they have repeatedly failed in the biggest moments of their career, and it's been year after year after year after year. But Jan Blachowicz, within this, some are late bloomers. Jan Blachowicz, I believe, is like, 37, 39 years old, somewhere around there when it comes down to it. He's finally the UFC light heavyweight champion, and when it comes down to it, take a look at the recent wins that he had. Corey Anderson dominated Jan Blachowicz in the first fight that they had. Jan Blachowicz ended up knocking him out in round 1. All right? And did a pretty damn good job in that fight even before he knocked him out. He also beat, I believe, Jacare Souza. He knocked out Luke Rockhold. Then he knocked out Dominic Reyes. He beat the shit out of Dominic Reyes, man. A very decently skilled fighter. So you can't always necessarily go by that. So even the point of those people saying, well, Gilbert Burns got knocked out by Dan Hooker. Okay, well, first of all, not only can Dan Hooker hit at 155, but some people overall will get knocked down or get knocked out at a certain weight division, move up, and then overall they seem to just do better. Like Robert Whittaker got knocked out by Stephen Wonderboy Thompson at 155 when he was there, or excuse me, at 170. And then he went up to 185, had 2 wars with Yoel Romero, didn't get knocked out at all. So you can't necessarily judge by that. And of course, what his retort was is that, well, Stephen Wonderboy Thompson is a very gifted striker. Dan Hooker is just an average striker. Well, Dan Hooker certainly is an above average striker. He's one of the top 5 guys in the lightweight division right now. But I get what you're saying. Stephen Wonderboy Thompson would most likely be a better fighter than Dan Hooker is. But it's not necessarily about who's more skilled. It's about how hard you hit. Dan Hooker can knock anybody out with one good shot. if he really needed to, or at least with a knee, which I believe is what he hit Gilbert Burns with. Bottom line is this, when it comes down to it, you can't necessarily always go by what happened in these UFC fighters past, especially with the UFC fighters. Because we've seen time and time again. Take a look at Michael Bisping, for example. Michael Bisping was a guy that would lose every big fight in his life. You're talking about a dude that would lose to Chael Sonnen. He lost to Chael Sonnen at one point in time. Lost to Dan Henderson. Lost to Luke Rockhold. Then what happened? He became the UFC champion. Beat Luke Rockhold. Knocked him out in round 1. Alright? So it is what it is. You don't always judge these fighters by their past. And this is the same thing with Jan Blachowicz, man. Jan Blachowicz, once again, I would not be surprised whatsoever if he won this fight.
105. He can gain this weight, but has elected openly not to. Hello again. That part's the experiment. He has openly elected to go fight another guy at the end of the night under the unified rules for up to 25 minutes. Oh, and by the way, the other guy just happens to be a bigger guy. Anybody else through history or even logically thinking would try to get as close to that 205 pounds as they can. I'm very in for that experience.
What tells me that Israel Adesanya has the right mindset for this fight, because speed, he's going to have to win this fight off his speed. And Israel Adesanya also said that in his mind that he's the major underdog in this fight, which I think is always the right mentality to have if you're a world-class fighter. So Israel Adesanya is certainly going in with the best intentions, I believe. Is he going to come in completely with the 100 best strategy? Well, we'll see about that. I believe that most likely he is. But even with his strategy, is he going to beat Jan? We'll have to see. I personally did predict Israel just because I believe most likely he's going to land more and throw more. But I would not be surprised if Jan Blachowicz ended up knocking him out or outpointed him. Because Jan Blachowicz, he's kind of a dark horse a little bit. He has a lot more skills than a lot of people realize. But we'll just see what happens.
Because, guys, we do know it is not a size advantage. It's called a size advantage, but throughout time, it has always been a size disadvantage. The hardest guy to wrestle was from one weight class below you. The hardest guy to box is one weight class below you. The hardest guy to fight is one weight class below you. That size isn't enough for the tipping point to take place. It is just enough to make sure, as a built-in feature, that he's a little bit faster than you. Nothing you could do about it. He's going to be a little bit faster because he's 12 pounds less. He can also hop around on his feet and go a little bit closer to the 25 minutes, still feeling great than you can. Meaning his conditioning is just going to stretch a little bit longer.
We'll see about that, because Jan Blachowicz does not waste his punches. And Jan Blachowicz, overall, when it comes down to it, seems to have a very decent gas tank. Israel Adesanya seems to have a great gas tank as well. Now, he might be a decent amount faster. Maybe Israel Adesanya, once again, it seems like he's preparing for speed in this fight, which is how he is probably going to win this fight, if he is going to win this fight. So we'll see what happens. This is what I'm saying. Jan Blachowicz needs to go after his legs. He needs to go after his legs. He needs to go after his body. If he tries to go headhunt with Israel Adesanya the whole entire time, he's going to get embarrassed in this fight. He is not going to outpoint Israel Adesanya by trying to headhunt with him the whole entire time. You can't do that. It is what it is. All right, you're going to have to go to the head with the jab. You're also going to have to go after the legs. You're going to have to go after the body. I've seen Jan Blachowicz kill Dominic Reyes to the body with those kicks. All right, in that fight. So, hopefully for his sake, he does the same thing. So we'll see what happens.
But those are just built-in pieces of logic. Now, of course, you could come back and go, yes, but the power. Well, the power was Blachowicz anyway. It wouldn't matter if Adesanya gained that weight or not. And they call him the Polish hammer for good reason. If he hits you, it's going to hurt you badly. Now, Blachowicz only needs to land one punch, and he's got 25 minutes.
I agree.
Minutes to do it.
But that also is a good question. Can Blachowicz, I believe that's how you pronounce it. Maybe it is Blachowicz. I don't know. But can Jan Blachowicz, that's just the way that I'll pronounce it, Can he keep that stamina? From what I've seen, he can. But we'll see what happens. Because this is a title fight against a fighter that also has a great power for his division. Now, do I believe that Israel Adesanya will most likely knock out Jan Blachowicz with one punch? No, I'm not saying it's impossible, but he's going to have to hit Jan Blachowicz probably a certain amount of times to knock him out. And I'm not sure how comfortable Israel Adesanya is going to be going in there as he was with, say, Paulo Costa, because Jan Blachowicz is a very good inside fighter. He's very good in the exchanges. He's extremely accurate, and he can knock you out with one punch, and he can basically make every punch count. Whether it be to the body, whether it be to the head, whether it be kicks to the body, whether it be kicks to the legs. Every strike that Jan Blachowicz lands, you can feel. So it is what it is. We'll see what happens.
So I think it's a big gamble on my part to pick Adesanya. I do. I think that's a very big gamble.
It's somewhat of a gamble. Once again, I don't think a lot of people really realize how much of a 50-50 fight this is capable of being. I'm really hoping that we see a 50-50 fight, because to be quite honest with you, what I see in the potential of this fight is that I see either a potential domination from either side or a potential 50-50 fight of basically speed versus the bigger guy that needs to make his power more relevant. So we'll see what happens. This has the capacity, or this has the opportunity to be a 50-50 fight. I think most likely is probably going to end up being a one-sided fight in either Blachowicz's favor or Adesanya's favor, which one we'll see on Saturday night. But when it comes down to it, I'm really hoping that we get a 50-50 fight here.
Knowing that Blachowicz only has to hit him once, I think that Adesanya is so tricky that he will frustrate Blachowicz. When you get frustrated in a fight, that's when you...
I think his speed and his movement might frustrate Blachowicz. We'll see. I don't think Israel Adesanya, even though he is very slippery and maneuverable, he is not as slippery and maneuverable as a certain amount of people think. Paulo Costa especially made him look very maneuverable and very slippery, because once again, Paulo Costa is a very one-dimensional fighter. He's going to come forward and he's going to try to break you. If you get past that, Paulo Costa has nothing left. And on top of that, he has no stamina after 2 rounds. So it is what it is. But Blachowicz is a tier or two above Paulo Costa. Probably a couple tiers above Paulo Costa. He might even be a tier above a Robert Whittaker. So we'll see what happens.
Start doing things and taking shots and swinging for the fences when it's not there. When you start doing what we call throwing air balls. You don't do that until you're frustrated. Until the guy's already tricked you 2 or 3 times, needs you in the ribs, and shut one of your eyes. Now you're frustrated. Now you're pissed off.
Let me also say this. Blachowicz's movement is underrated. I think a lot of the skill set that Blachowicz has, I think it's going in underrated and underestimated in this fight. I think Blachowicz moves out of the way pretty decently. Now, he can be hit here and there. Maybe especially with leg kicks. That's why Blachowicz is going to have to go back to the legs and make Israel Adesanya a little bit shaken and make him feel his power. But when it comes down to it, Israel Adesanya, I bet his strategy is to go after the legs consistently and work off his jab, and try to basically be very shifty and move throughout the whole entire fight. That has to be his strategy. There's no way that he's going to go in there and exchange with Blachowicz, and I think we all know that. So it is what it is. The question is that will Blachowicz come in with a very good strategy to counter that, or will Israel Adesanya's speed be too much? And that's what makes this such an intriguing matchup.
But now you just start swinging, which is exactly what the guy that hurt you in the first place is waiting for you to do. That's where you can start to get picked apart. And we really saw that on good display just in Adesanya's last fight. But when Adesanya started to frustrate Paulo Costa, that's when things unraveled very quickly. So
okay, but that's I get what you're coming from, jail. But Paulo Costa is not the fighter that Jan Blachowicz is. Once again, and I predicted that fight right on the money because I seen exactly what Paulo Costa was. Paulo Costa is not a multi-dimensional fighter. He is a very one-dimensional fighter. So it is what it is. Jan Blachowicz, he is not a one-dimensional fighter. in the striking game and in any part of his game. Jan Blachowicz is a very complete fighter, very powerful, and just it's going to be very hard because some of the weaknesses that Israel Adesanya has in his game, I do believe Jan Blachowicz can capitalize on if he has the right game plan. But we'll see what happens.
I think that you're going to have something very special here. Because I do think you're going to have a stand-up fight where Adesanya is going to play one game, which is get to the target as often.
This could be a stand-up fight. I could easily see Jan Blachowicz trying to get Israel Adesanya in a clinch. Maybe Adesanya tries to get Blachowicz in a clinch, but that's not really his game. That's not usually Blachowicz's game either. But he might try to use his size to his advantage if he can. And if he starts tiring out his legs, if he does go to his legs, maybe we'll try to beat him up and do a little bit of dirty boxing or dirty striking on the inside up against the cage.
As I can, as quickly as I can. That's a rare game. Most guys will do those same ingredients, except they're going to get there as hard as I can. I don't think Adesanya's thinking hard at all. I don't think he's thinking power at all. I think he's thinking I need to touch this guy, and I need to touch him as often as I can, and then get out of the way so that he doesn't touch me.
I agree. I agree with you 100%. The question is that with Blachowicz, if he comes in with an A-grade game plan, is that going to work? I think that he had an excellent game plan against Dominic Reyes. I did not expect Jan Blachowicz to throw as much as he did. I did not expect him to be as accurate as he was in that fight. I underestimated Blachowicz a hell of a lot in that Dominic Reyes fight. When he fought in that fight, I said, wow, this dude is a decent amount more skilled than I thought he was. I thought Jan Blachowicz was a C-class fighter really until he fought Dominic Reyes, and I said, wow. This dude really is something else. This dude's an A-class fighter. Not just an A-class fighter. This dude's an A-plus fighter. So we'll see what happens.
If I'm right, and that is what Adesanya plans to do, and moreover, Adesanya can go out and execute, he's going to frustrate Blachowicz.
Once again, well, let's get past this ad.
Out of here, away, all in exchange for a sip of coffee. Yeah, it's Black Rifle Coffee. Let's try some.
Many people are very light on the idea. Adesanya's the favorite right now. But many people...
Well, of course. And I predicted that. Israel Adesanya is going to be the favorite going in. Once again, I've seen about 80% of people favoring Adesanya. I think a certain amount of people are favoring Adesanya so much because they don't like him. And they're already disappointed by this matchup because they expect him to win so easily. And they're not going to be intrigued until they see Israel Adesanya versus John Jones possibly. But do not underestimate Jan Blachowicz. Blachowicz is a hell of a fighter.
People are very light on the idea that he can knock out Blachowicz. I agree with you to put Blachowicz asleep or unconscious is unlikely. But to get a TKO where you've hit him so many times and frustrated him, got him to the point of the exhaustion that he can no longer continue is very, very realistic within 25 minutes.
It's possible. Once again, that's why I said it's not impossible because Israel Adesanya does have very good power. But I don't know if he's going to have enough power to beat Blachowicz. And Blachowicz, really, he does not get hit that often. Now, maybe overall he is going to be in this fight because Israel Adesanya is just so speedy. But once again, if you were to go in by that, I think you'd be underestimating Jan's skill set by a lot and kind of overestimating Israel's skill set a little bit. Because Israel Adesanya, even though he is an A-plus fighter, he does have some weaknesses. So it is what it is. I think that his win over Paulo Costa, who once again was a very one-dimensional fighter, I think a certain amount of people do not see a certain amount of the weaknesses that he has. He does have weaknesses, and Jan Blachowicz looks like one of those fighters that could possibly counter on his weaknesses. But we'll just have to see what his game plan is going to be.
Now, I don't have to go that far in my prediction by way of TKO, by way of decision. I don't have to go that far, and therefore I'm not. But I will give you in my final analysis, Israel Adesanya will be the light heavyweight champion of the world.
That's really about it for that. So I agree with some of what Chael said. I think that Chael is actually overestimating Israel's skill set, and I believe he's actually underestimating Jan Blachowicz's skill set. I don't think that this fight is going to be the same thing as Paulo Costa. Once again, Paulo Costa, and if you look at my old prediction on this channel, you can go ahead and look it up. I predicted Israel Adesanya to knock out Paulo Costa, I believe, within 3 rounds, because I knew exactly what Paulo Costa was. Jan Blachowicz is not Paulo Costa. He is not a one-dimensional fighter. He is not going to just try and completely bait Israel Adesanya the whole entire time. He will be going after him, and consistently. He will at least be trying to hit to the body. Now, whether he goes consistently to the legs, who knows? That to me is going to be the main thing. So we'll see what happens there. He needs to go after the legs. He needs to go after the body with the kicks, and he needs to do it early to show his power, to show that he's going after Israel. He needs to stick the jab out there consistently. He cannot headhunt Israel completely. There are certain things that Blachowicz has to where he can compete with Israel in certain areas. Once again, a certain amount of people say that Israel has more tools. We're going to see. Because Jan Blachowicz, he has certain things that him specifically, I believe he can counter Israel Adesanya on. But we'll see what happens. Once again, it's going to depend on the game plan. It's also going to depend on how fast Israel Adesanya is. You know, I might be here on Saturday night or Sunday whenever I release the fight review, and I might say, well, I was completely wrong. Blachowicz didn't have a single thing to counter, and overall, Israel Adesanya was just too fast. You know, I might be saying that. You never know with these fights. I've been wrong before, but the way that I see things, Blachowicz does have a possibility of countering on Israel Adesanya's weaknesses. You know, now, of course, Adesanya, of course, has that same opportunity, but we'll see what happens. Anyways, that's really about it for today. Thank you so much for watching. I'm still going to go with Israel Adesanya by unanimous decision, but I would not be surprised if Jan Blachowicz won this fight. Let's just say that. So we'll see what happens. I'll see y'all later.